Hey everyone, and welcome to this explainer brought to you by All Nutrition. We are the platform that synthesizes the absolute latest scientific publications into clear, actionable health takeaways just for you. And today, man, we have an incredibly compelling topic. We're talking about a fundamental shift in how we actually understand human biology. Think about it. For the longest time, we've naturally separated the mind from the body, right? But the latest data reveals this intricate, almost invisible relationship between what you eat, how you think, and how your body processes energy. The food on your plate is quite literally writing the software code for your brain. So today, we're diving into this fascinating concept supported by a massive array of new studies, which is that your gut essentially acts as a second brain. The latest scientific literature states that functional nutrition is a non-pharmacological approach to supporting cognitive health. And honestly, this is a massive paradigm shift for us. Usually when we experience brain fog or mood dips or cognitive issues, our first instinct is to reach for a pill, or we just assume, it's just stress. But science is telling us we really need to look at our plates first. Functional nutrition is our best, most foundational tool to support our mental and metabolic vitality long before we ever step foot in a pharmacy.
Okay, here is our logical flow for today. 1. The gut-brain highway. 2. The Mediterranean diet and metabolism. 3. Plant swaps and fasting. 4. Nutrients for the mind. And finally, 5. Nutrition across the lifespan. Let's kick things off with Section 1. The gut-brain highway, connecting digestion and cognition.
To truly understand the all-nutrition synthesis of these scientific publications, we first need to define a really critical biological term, and that's the microbiota gut-brain axis. Basically, this is a highly complex bidirectional communication network. Your gut bacteria are down there actively producing specific chemicals, most notably short-chain fatty acids, or SCFAs. I want you to think of these SCFAs as literal text messages sent from your stomach directly up to your brain. They aren't just random digestive byproducts. They are crucial chemical messengers that travel up your nervous system and physically program your cognitive health, your mood, and just your overall brain function.
And to show you how this chain reaction actually works, there's this absolutely fascinating clinical study involving electroacupuncture. The intervention actually orchestrates and stimulates specific SCFA-producing bacteria in the gut. These fatty acids then travel that gut-brain axis we just talked about, and as a result, they actively improve what scientists call hippocampal synaptic plasticity. In plain English, they help your brain cells adapt, learn, and communicate way better with one another. It is essentially like upgrading the bandwidth of your brain. And the ultimate outcome of this specific study? This exact pathway simultaneously alleviated both comorbid obesity and depression. It's just a beautiful, intricate chain reaction from the gut right up to the mind.
Moving right along to Section 2, Mediterranean diet and metabolism, the foundational shift. So obviously, the crucial point here is that the fuel we put into the system matters immensely. You simply cannot run a high-performance communication network on low-quality fuel. When we analyze recent randomized controlled trials, a really clear winner emerges, and it's the green Mediterranean diet. In a specific trial that compared a standard healthy diet to the green Mediterranean diet, researchers found that this specific dietary pattern significantly modifies the gut microbiome to improve cardiometabolic health in ways that standard diets just simply do not achieve. It is actively changing the bacterial landscape of your gut to build a literal fortress protecting your heart and your metabolism. Now, contrasting that previous data, a completely separate trial, the randomized mind diet intervention, discovered a really powerful distinct data point. In this specific trial, researchers found that it's actually the weight loss itself and the resulting metabolic improvements that dominate the overall microbiome response. So what does this mean? It means it's not just the physical food entering your system that alters the bacteria. The biological process of losing weight through this specific dietary intervention creates a massive positive ripple effect through your entire internal ecosystem. The very action of shedding weight reprograms the gut. And the versatility of this dietary approach across completely different populations is just staggering. For example, in athletic populations, one study demonstrates that the diet actually enhances endurance training adaptations, which is fueled by those gut microbiota-derived short-chain fatty acids we defined earlier. But then, in a completely separate trial focusing on older Australians, the diet actively improved overall well-being and quality of life. And if we look at the highly specific MediMind clinical trial, researchers found that when the Mediterranean diet is combined with mindful eating practices, it significantly helps manage the severity of depression in people dealing with major depressive disorder and obesity. So that's one foundational diet, providing multiple unique population benefits.
All right, Section 3.
plant swaps, and fasting, reshaping the internal ecosystem.
You don't always need to execute an overnight overhaul of your entire life. Sometimes strategic, targeted swaps work absolute wonders. Distinct, parallel, randomized clinical trials focused strictly on adults who were already diagnosed with metabolic syndrome. The researchers simply explored the impact of replacing standard animal proteins with plant proteins. And the data? It revealed significant, measurable shifts in metabolic syndrome components and cardiovascular risk indicators, just by modifying that one single macronutrient source. It is a powerful reminder that small, sustained changes in what you consume can drastically reshape your internal ecosystem over time.
Now, let's look at a very specific and highly vulnerable population, adults living with a BMI above 27 and severe mental illness. We look to the findings of the Normie Heart trial here. Data from this trial proves how targeted, clinical dietitian-led nutrition counseling paired with a structured exercise routine dramatically reduces cardiovascular risks. It proves that even in really complex clinical scenarios where patients are facing compounding health challenges, structured nutritional intervention is an incredibly potent, life-saving tool that works beautifully right alongside traditional treatments.
But hey, beyond what you eat, All Nutrition's analysis of the literature highlights that when you eat matters profoundly. Fasting-related changes to the microbiota actually boost microglial function, and you can think of microglia as the dedicated immune cells and cleanup crew in your brain. Boosting them actually helps ameliorate cognitive decline associated with obesity. Furthermore, a secondary analysis of a totally separate clinical trial highlighted the power of time-restricted eating, or TRE. Unlike general fasting, which can sometimes be a bit erratic, a structured, time-restricted eating window dramatically improves sleep quality and stabilizes mood in overweight adults, proving the timing of your fuel is just as crucial as the fuel itself. Okay, so these broad dietary patterns and strategic meal timing techniques are incredibly powerful foundations. But what if a specific condition requires a much more targeted nutritional intervention? What if a general diet, even a really great one, isn't quite enough to address a highly specific cognitive or metabolic challenge? Which brings us to Section 4, Nutrients for the Mind, Targeted Interventions. To really understand precision nutrition, we must look at 3 distinctly different clinical interventions. First, for adults diagnosed with ADHD, a double-blind, placebo-controlled trial found measurable, targeted benefits from specific vitamin-mineral treatments. Second, in a completely separate study focusing on individuals experiencing everyday psychological distress, randomized trials showed that omega-3 supplementation effectively targeted stress, anxiety, and everyday memory function. And third, shifting entirely to a completely different demographic, researchers found that intranasal oxytocin actually altered the oral microbiome composition in children with autism. This really highlights how isolated nutrients and compounds can act directly and specifically on the mind and body. Finally, let's zoom out. Section 5, Nutrition across the lifespan, from preschool to older adults. When we analyze the absolute opposite ends of the age spectrum, the scientific data is just incredibly compelling. On one end, a cluster randomized trial showed that fortified formula milk actively enhances the microbiotic gut-brain axis to actually support neurocognitive development in preschool children. Now go to the absolute other end of the spectrum, and another randomized crossover trial found that simply adding a green supplementation triggers powerful epigenetic responses in obese older adults. And epigenetics essentially means this supplementation is changing how their genes are expressed. It is literally updating the cellular software to fight off age-related decline. And it doesn't always have to be a complicated pharmaceutical intervention to protect your system. For everyday general digestive health maintenance, common foods play a massive, scientifically validated role. Recent clinical studies actually support the consumption of ancient grain flour as a highly effective, novel therapeutic approach for managing irritable bowel syndrome. Meanwhile, a separate crossover study demonstrated that something as simple as your morning yogurt and rolled oats significantly builds daily gut microbiome resilience for the average person. Small daily habits create long-term biological armor. So we've covered a tremendous amount of ground today, right? Everything from the biological highway of short-chain fatty acids to precise clinical trials on ADHD, depression, and age-related cognitive decline. Knowing that every single bite you take is essentially programming your cognitive and metabolic vitality, the most important question you have to ask yourself right now is this: what biological information will you feed your second brain today? Thanks for joining us for this explainer.